Here is something history doesn't teach you in school. Nazi Germany was not held together only by terror. Terror silenced people. But silence is not the same as cooperation, and the regime needed cooperation from civil servants, judges, business owners, factory managers, police officers, teachers, lawyers, and millions of ordinary citizens who showed up to work every morning and kept the machine running. So how do you get that kind of cooperation at scale? You make loyalty pay, and you make resistance expensive. To understand how this worked, you need to start with the wreckage. By the early 1930s, Germany was broken in ways that are almost impossible to overstate. The First World War had ended in humiliation. The Treaty of Versailles had imposed crushing reparations. The early republic had survived attempted coups, political assassinations, and street violence between competing factions. Then came 1923. Hyperinflation so severe that wages lost value between morning and afternoon. People carried cash in baskets not because they were wealthy, but because the currency had become nearly meaningless. Germany stabilized briefly in the mid-1920s. Then the Great Depression arrived and shattered whatever recovery had been built. Banks failed. Businesses closed. Unemployment soared. Millions of people who had done everything right, worked hard, saved carefully, trusted the system, found themselves with nothing. That is the moment political extremism stops looking like madness and starts looking like an answer. The Nazis offered order, national revival, scapegoats, and above all, jobs. It was a lie, wrapped in economic desperation. And desperation is one of history's most reliable recruiters. When Hitler became chancellor in January 1933, the consolidation moved faster than most democracies had ever seen a government move. Within weeks, civil liberties were suspended. Within months, political opponents were arrested. Independent institutions were brought into line, and Germany had crossed from troubled democracy into dictatorship. But here is what most history books underemphasize. The consolidation was not only police and decrees. It was also payrolls, promotions, and career incentives. In April 1933, the regime passed a law allowing the removal of Jews and political opponents from public employment. Civil servants, judges, professors, teachers, lawyers, and administrators learned almost immediately that professional survival now had political conditions. The state had become a loyalty filter. And once the state becomes partisan, a paycheck becomes a political test. A civil servant did not need to be a fanatic to understand the new calculation. Advancement belonged to the aligned. Risk belonged to the suspect. Silence became safer than principle. Joining the party, adapting language, proving reliability. These things could protect a career. Refusing them could end one. This is how dictatorship spreads through ordinary institutions, not only through dramatic arrests, through daily calculations at desks, in offices, in schools, and in courtrooms. Then came the question of how to pay for all of it. The Gestapo, the secret state police, is often imagined as something operating outside the law, a rogue apparatus of pure terror. But that image misses something important. The Gestapo was not funded like a criminal gang. It became part of the state's police architecture. Salaries, offices, vehicles, informant networks, prisons, and administrative machinery were supported through state budgets and state authority. Under Nazi law, the machinery of repression was made legal, because the regime had rewritten legality around its own power. That is the lesson. Legality is not the same as legitimacy. When a movement captures the courts, the ministries, the police, and the lawmaking process, it can make repression legal simply by writing the rules itself. The Gestapo was not outside the state. It was what happened when the state became loyal to the party instead of the law. Many terrible things in history were made legal first. The horror was not lawlessness. It was law placed in the service of power. Fear needed to be paired with employment, and the regime understood this precisely. By 1933, unemployment was one of Germany's deepest wounds. The Nazis moved aggressively, public works, rearmament, conscription, labor programs, to create the appearance and reality of economic recovery. The Autobahn became a symbol of national renewal. Military production expanded. Young men were absorbed into labor programs and military service. But the trade-off was brutal. In May 1933, the regime destroyed free trade unions. Offices were seized. Leaders were arrested. Independent labor representation was replaced with a state-controlled organization that existed to serve the regime's goals, not workers' interests. The message was unmistakable. You could have a job. but not a voice. You could belong, but not negotiate. You could work, but only inside the political order the regime permitted. Obedience was the price of employment. Business learned the same lesson, though often more comfortably. Nazi Germany did not abolish private enterprise, it redirected it. Many industrialists were not early ideological Nazis. Some feared communism more than Hitler, some wanted labor discipline, some wanted stability, some simply wanted contracts. The regime did not need to buy every executive with a simple cash transaction. It made cooperation profitable and resistance dangerous. Rearmament created enormous opportunities for firms in steel, chemicals, vehicles, aircraft, and construction. The destruction of unions pleased many employers. State contracts flowed toward firms aligned with regime priorities. Military spending created demand. Under Hjalmar Schacht, the regime used financial instruments called MEFO bills, promissory notes tied to a dummy company, to finance rearmament while hiding the true scale of military spending from public view. The Nazis used financial engineering to fund militarization before the public could fully see the bill. Even dictatorships, it turns out, enjoy creative accounting. This was not free market capitalism, nor was it state socialism. It was politically directed capitalism under dictatorship. Private firms could profit, but the largest opportunities flowed toward the regime's goals. Business survived by learning where power wanted the money to go. Then came the darkest mechanism of all. The Nazis did not only exclude Jews from citizenship, professions, and public life. They systematically stripped Jewish families of property, businesses, income, and assets through boycotts, professional bans, forced sales, and discriminatory laws, culminating in deportation and murder. Aryanization transferred Jewish-owned businesses and property into non-Jewish hands, typically through coercive sales at a fraction of real value. This was not incidental. It was redistribution through persecution. And here is the sentence that cuts hardest. A dictatorship does not only destroy its victims, it recruits beneficiaries. Every theft created not only a victim, but someone who received a bargain, someone who moved into an empty position, someone who acquired a business or an apartment or a professional opportunity that had belonged to another person days before. This is one reason loyalty economies become so morally poisonous. They turn crime into opportunity. They make ordinary people materially invested in not asking too many questions, because asking questions might mean returning what was taken. Welfare was politicized too. The Nazis spoke constantly of the Volksgemeinschaft, the people's community. Social support, winter relief campaigns, family benefits, and public assistance were used to reinforce belonging for those considered racially and politically acceptable. At the same time, Jews, political opponents, disabled people, and Roma were excluded, persecuted, and murdered. The welfare state did not disappear. It was racialized and turned into a reward for belonging. This is a central authoritarian pattern. The population is divided into deserving insiders, suspicious outsiders, and punishable enemies. Benefits flow to the insiders. Fear is directed at the outsiders. Violence is justified against the enemies. And the people inside the favored circle learn that their security depends on the regime continuing to define them as loyal, useful, and acceptable. That is not social solidarity. It is conditional belonging enforced by power. By the late 1930s, Nazi Germany had built an economy where loyalty touched almost everything: work, contracts, promotions, welfare, property, business opportunity, legal protection, social standing. Fear was everywhere, but so was incentive. People joined the party not only because they believed, but because membership helped careers. Businesses cooperated not only because they agreed, but because the regime controlled contracts. Officials complied not only because they were afraid, but because advancement required reliability. Citizens looked away not only because they feared punishment, but because some had something to gain from silence. The regime did not ask everyone to become a monster on day one. It asked them to make one small compromise, then another, to accept one favor, to ignore one exclusion, to profit from one vacancy, to tell themselves that politics is messy, that everyone does it, that survival comes first. And by the time enough people realized the economy had become a machine of obedience, the machine was already paying too many people to stop. Financial freedom is not only about protecting money from inflation, bad policy, or economic collapse. It is also about understanding how money can be used to buy silence, loyalty, and compliance. Because when the state controls who gets paid, who gets protected, who gets investigated, and who gets punished, money stops being just money. It becomes discipline. History shows that fear can build a dictatorship, but fear alone does not sustain one. The more durable system is one where loyalty pays, dissent costs, and ordinary people stop asking what is right and start asking what is safe. That is when a society is in real danger. If this gave you a different way of seeing the world, subscribe to the Fiscal Record. History has the answers. I'll show you where to look.